When we look at the evolution of strategic thinking, we can see a clear trajectory. Chandler emphasized how structure must adapt to strategy. Porter insisted on positioning and the discipline of trade-offs. Mintzberg urged us to pay attention to emergence and the messy reality of practice. Ansoff mapped out growth paths. Penrose showed us the role of resources inside the firm, and J. Barney formalized that insight into the resource-based view, stressing that unique, valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable resources are the foundation of sustainable advantage. Building on this line of thinking, two scholars, C.K. Prahalad and Gary Hamel, took the discussion a step further in the early 1990s by introducing the idea of core competencies. Their central claim was that in a world of rapid change and intensifying competition, firms could not rely simply on products or market positions. Instead, they needed to identify, nurture, and leverage the deep competencies at the heart of their organizations, the collective learning and capabilities that underpinned their ability to innovate and compete across industries. Prahalad and Hamel's most famous exposition of this idea came in their 1990 Harvard Business Review article, The Core Competence of the Corporation. In it, they argued that products come and go, markets shift, technologies evolve, but what sustains firms over the long term are the competencies that allow them to create new products and enter new markets repeatedly. They defined core competencies as the collective learning in the organization, especially how to coordinate diverse production skills and integrate multiple streams of technology. In other words, competencies are not just skills in the narrow sense, they are deeper capabilities that span the organization and enable it to adapt and innovate. To illustrate their idea, Prahalad and Hamel pointed to companies like Honda. Honda's success, they argued, did not come from individual car models or motorcycle lines, but from its underlying competence in engines and powertrains. This competence allowed Honda to move from motorcycles to cars, from lawnmowers to generators, and even to marine engines. What tied these diverse products together was a shared technological and organizational capability in engine design and manufacturing. This was Honda's core competence, and it allowed the firm to compete across industries, not just within a single product category. Another classic example is Canon. Canon's competence was in precision, mechanics, fine optics, and microelectronics. These capabilities allowed it to move from cameras into photocopiers, printers, and imaging systems. Again, it was not a single product or market that defined Canon's strength, but a deeper competence that could be leveraged in multiple ways. Prahalad and Hamel's argument challenged the then dominant product-market view of strategy. They warned that many firms were in danger of becoming portfolio managers of businesses, treating products and business units as isolated investments to be bought and sold. In such a view, firms might focus narrowly on market share or short-term profits, but they risked hollowing out their core capabilities. The real long-term winners, they argued, would be those that identified and cultivated their core competencies, using them to create new markets and sustain innovation. This insight had significant implications for how firms were managed. First, it shifted attention from the question, what products should we make, to what competencies do we have, and how can we leverage them? Second, it emphasized the importance of learning and integration. Competencies are not owned by any single individual or department. They are collective, spread across the organization. Building them requires coordination, knowledge sharing, and long-term investment. Third, it urged managers to think of strategy not only as positioning in existing markets, but as the capacity to create new markets by leveraging what the firm knows how to do uniquely well. Consider Apple again. Its products have changed dramatically over time, from personal computers to iPods to iPhones to services. But what ties them together is a set of core competencies: design excellence, user experience integration, and the ability to create ecosystems of hardware and software. These competencies allow Apple to repeatedly enter new product categories and dominate them. The iPod was not just a music player, it was part of a design and user experience competence that later translated into the iPhone. Apple's competence lies not only in making devices, but in orchestrating experiences that customers value. Or take Google. Its core competence lies in algorithms and data management. This competence enabled it to dominate search, but also to extend into advertising, maps, email, and cloud services. While the products differ, the underlying capability in handling massive data and providing algorithmic solutions is consistent. This is why Google has been able to diversify effectively while maintaining coherence. Of course, the idea of core competencies is not without its challenges. Identifying them is not always straightforward. Managers may confuse core products with competencies or mistake routine skills for deep capabilities. There is also the danger of complacency. A competence that is core today may become obsolete tomorrow if technology shifts. Kodak, for instance, had a competence in chemical imaging that was powerful for decades, but when digital imaging emerged, that competence lost its value. The lesson here is that competencies must be dynamic, evolving with technology and markets. Prahalad and Hamel themselves emphasize this, arguing that firms must not only build core competencies, but also renew them. Investment in training, research, and organizational integration is essential. Core competencies are cultivated over time. They cannot be bought on the market. They are embedded in people, processes, and culture. This makes them powerful, but also fragile if neglected. Critics of the core competence idea have pointed out that it can be vague. Almost anything could be labeled a competence. The challenge is to distinguish between capabilities that are truly distinctive and those that are generic. Moreover, some argue that the focus on core competencies can lead firms to become inward-looking, missing external changes. If you're too focused on your existing competence, you may fail to see disruptive innovations that make it irrelevant. Nokia, for example, had deep competencies in mobile hardware. But when the industry shifted toward software ecosystems, those competencies were insufficient. And nevertheless, the core competence perspective has proven remarkably resilient. It has been incorporated into strategic management, innovation studies, and corporate practice. Many firms today explicitly articulate their core competencies as part of their strategic identity. It provides a language for thinking about what is truly unique about a firm, what cannot be outsourced or easily imitated, and what forms the foundation for long-term success. In today's digital era, the concept of core competence is especially relevant. Digital technologies are fluid, and product life cycles are short. Firms cannot rely on a single product line to sustain them. Instead, they must build competencies that allow them to adapt and innovate continuously. Amazon's competence in logistics and digital platforms, Tesla's competence in battery technology and software integration, Microsoft's competence in enterprise software and cloud services. These are the deep roots that allow them to branch into multiple markets. Ethically, the competence perspective also invites reflection. If competencies are collective learning, how are employees valued and developed? If a firm's advantage comes from the knowledge and skills of its people, then investing in training, respecting expertise, and fostering collaboration are not only strategic imperatives, but ethical ones. Similarly, when firms outsource too aggressively, they may undermine their own competencies, but they may also contribute to precarious labor conditions elsewhere. Strategy here intersects with responsibility. Prahalad himself, later in his career, became well known for his work on the bottom of the pyramid, exploring how companies could develop strategies to serve the world's poorest populations. This too reflects the competence perspective. Firms can innovate not only to create luxury products, but also to address social needs, if they leverage their competencies with responsibility. The idea of core competence thus connects not only to competition and growth, but also to broader questions of purpose and ethics in business. For students and managers, the practical lesson of core competencies is to look beyond the surface of products and markets. Ask, what do we as an organization know how to do uniquely well? What are the deep skills and capabilities that span products and markets? How can we nurture them, protect them, and extend them into new opportunities? At the same time, remain vigilant. Core competencies must be renewed and adapted. What is core today may not be core tomorrow. The challenge is to evolve without losing coherence, to innovate without losing identity. Placed alongside other thinkers, Prahalad and Hamel's contribution is clear. Where Barney emphasized VRIN resources, they emphasized the integration of those resources into collective competencies that drive innovation. Where Porter focused on external positioning, they focused on internal capabilities that create new markets. Where Penrose saw growth emerging from the redeployment of resources, Prahalad and Hamel showed how competencies make such redeployment possible. Their work is part of the larger conversation that defines strategy as both external and internal, as both positioning and capability. In the end, the idea of core competencies reminds us that strategy is not just about competing today, but about building the foundation to compete tomorrow. Products are temporary, markets shift, technologies change. But the deep competencies of an organization, if nurtured and renewed, can sustain it across generations. That is the enduring lesson of Prahalad and Hamel.